the first question is about some news that came out of China this morning, how they're essentially cracking down on cryptocurrencies and ban or looking to outlaw their transactions. So do you think this, if like cryptocurrencies fail, will there be a ripple effect throughout the rest of the markets?
Yeah. You know what? Actually, a couple things. First of all, I do think it's a fairly big deal. The second biggest economy in the world is not allowing people to use cryptocurrencies for transactions. And it's one of the biggest problems with cryptocurrencies long term is just what they call the use case. What are you going to use it for? So you have this Bitcoin and, how do you use it? Can you buy things with it and what have you? But it is interesting that it's only down about 5% today. You would expect possibly that it could be down more because of what China's done. And I guess if I was a cryptocurrency investor, I'd be wondering, okay, China's going to do this. Does the US do it? Do other countries do it also? And that could be a really detrimental aspect to cryptocurrency itself. How that impacts the stock market is really kind of interesting. Uh, a couple of things. If somebody has to sell their stock holdings to cover some losses on cryptocurrency, that's how we get that contagion. So, for example, in 2020, 2008, when Lehman Brothers failed, there were all of these, mortgage bonds that were sitting out there that started to implode in that same time frame, and people had put insurance policies on top of those mortgage bonds, and they had to pay off. And so these are huge institutions. There was $7 trillion worth of these, they're called credit default swaps out there. So they had to sell, Cisco and IBM and such to pay off these credit default swaps. And so that's where you can get this connection, even though you didn't have, bonds in your portfolio, subprime loans, they were called at the time. You might still end up with some pain because people had to sell that. We have not seen that with this cryptocurrency so far. And I believe partly it's because there isn't tremendous amount of institutional buying inside of cryptocurrency. It's a lot of individuals. And although they might use leverage, they're not going to maybe have as big an impact on having to sell off for the stock market. I would suspect actually it could be positive because one of the things that has happened is those individual investors last year were mostly buying, technology, genomics, clean energy, right? All of these things. And then this year they moved a big chunk of their money off into the cryptocurrency arena. And so if that cryptocurrency starts to really falter, maybe some of that money comes back into the stock market. So I think it has a potential, at least in this environment, to be positive. And, we're seeing a decent market today. I'm looking at this. The S&P 500 is up 0.06%, even though China has done what they did. So it hasn't translated to stock market downturns, at least immediately. And I'd be surprised if it did, personally. But it's a great question. You should always try to connect the dots between different types of asset classes. So, because even if you don't have that asset class, what you do own could be the source of funds that somebody uses to pay off something that happens somewhere else. And so, and it's a great question as far as that goes.
Yeah, and with China, there's a lot of speculation that the reason they're doing this is more control, and essentially shifting people to a digital yuan, which they have essentially ability to track
Yep.
rather
Yep.
than having this kind of cryptocurrency things.
Yeah, they talked about they were going to bring out the digital one and what have you. And so, they would make sense in competitive environment where they can control like they can and say, hey, that you can't use Bitcoin and or Dogecoin or whatever. There's 8,000 some odd different cryptocurrencies now for transactions, but you can use the digital yuan. And the U.S. has been talking about the digital dollar. That's come up a couple of times, especially this summer. And so, do they do something similar? So that would be my concern as a cryptocurrency investor. Yeah, it's a good point, actually. I think it's partly a competitive situation. I've said that a long time ago. It's one of the big problems. You're going to end up competing against these countries and their regulators, and they can change the rules on cryptocurrency basically overnight, which is what's happened right now in China. So not a big surprise.